Welcome to the Gym Heroes Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Peacock. Today's show is brought to you by Gymdesk, the easiest gym management software you'll ever use. Take payments, create marketing automations, track attendance, and much more. To try the software out free, go to gymdesk.com. No credit card or painful sales call required. Our hero today is Phillip Payne, owner of Maple Martial Arts and holder of a master's degree in sports coaching. In this episode, we talk about the pros and cons of linear, rotating, and spiraling curriculum structures, as well as infusing physical literacy concepts into your programs. While Phillip works primarily with martial arts, these concepts apply across sports to gymnastics, dance, baseball, and beyond. So without further ado, Phillip Payne.
There we go. Cool. All right. So I'm just going to jump in and ask you, what's your background in martial art? Well, who are you? What's your background in martial arts? As well as we're going to be talking about curriculum and stuff today. So like, what's your background in like learning or education, whatever your background is, like educational psychology and stuff like that?
So my name's Phil Payne. I've been a martial arts coach since 1996, a few years now. I used to work in IT full time, but then I sort of gave that up and threw it all in to go full time with the martial arts for about 2008.
Nice.
I opened my first full time venue in 2009 and then a second one in 2014. So we run two now with between the two, about 60 classes a week and about 500 students, something like that. Out of the 60 classes, I only teach about 6 of them though. I don't have time to do that and everything else as well. So
right.
I'll limit my coaching to the stuff that I actually, I enjoy teaching. So that's what I'm doing now. Now, alongside that, I'm also, and have been for quite some time, back at university studying again. The first time round, it was in computing and IT. Long time ago. And then more recently, I did a foundation. In fact, I did a personal training course, first of all, level 3. And then I went on to a foundation degree in coaching and performance management at a local college. And then from that got me into doing a top-up year to make it an honours BSc at Leeds Beckett, or Leeds Met, as it was at the time. And then from there, I ended up a couple of years later going on to do a part-time master's in sports coaching. And then I did nothing for a few years in terms of the academic stuff other than working on what I wanted to implement within my club from what I'd learned in the past. But now I'm doing what they call a professional doctorate.
Awesome.
Which is similar to the PhD. I did look at a PhD, but the thought of spending 6 years of my life researching to provide something for researchers to read to get a job within research had no appeal to me whatsoever. Two or three people might read your paper. So the professional doctorate, which is the same level 8 doctorate as the PhD, but rather than being an academic as such, you're a practitioner that just happens to research. So that's the way that I thought I could have a better impact on our industry and our sector, rather than just producing it for researchers.
That's awesome. Is that a doctor of education you're doing or something similar to that?
It's a doctor of professional practice.
Oh, okay. That must be something you have overseas.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever heard of that over here.
Yeah, it's similar to what you're talking about, doctor of education. There's I think there's at least 3 doctorate level 8s. So you still get the doctor title and everything, but it's just a bit more meaningful in terms of having impact within your industry as a practitioner. But at the same time, you still get to research as well, but you just get to direct it a little bit more.
Yeah, that's very cool. So I guess it's more oriented towards the practice of it than the expanding theories and And
you're still using the theories, and you're still using the research exactly the same. It's just that, like you said, you're putting it into practice, and you're looking at practice and analysing practice, and seeing how the research can affect practice. Where a lot of the time with academic research, it just gets done, and then that's the job ended, then it's finished.
Yep.
Whereas what I'm looking at doing is trying to take something called the physical literacy framework, and then looking through that as a lens to see how we can impact children's martial arts so that they continue not only to train within the martial arts, but continue to take part in sport and physical activity for life, really. That's the end result, keeping them in sport and physical activity.
Yeah, that's a great thing to focus on. Very cool. Well, along with that, so today I stumbled across, I believe it's Maple Martial Arts. Is that what the name of your?
So you've heard me mention already the physical literacy.
Yeah.
So Maple is something I came up with a couple of years ago. So the actual study that I'm doing within the Prof Doc, the professional doctorate, is around using physical literacy within martial arts framework, and the idea is to produce an engine of sorts, whether it's through courses or memberships, that people can take their technical aspects of their martial art and then drop it in around the framework that we've got, so that it's not only delivering the technical aspects, but it's delivering on the physical, the psychological, the social as well. And then that makes more sense then when you understand that MAPLE stands for Martial Arts Physical Literacy Engine.
Cool. Very
that's
cool.
That's where the MAPLE bit comes from.
Yeah. So your website's got a bunch of great articles on it. There's too many cool articles to cover today, but today we're going to focus on some of the curriculum stuff. And so you wrote a great article on linear curriculums, rotating curriculums, and nested rotating curriculums. Now, I've seen linear and rotating curriculums covered in martial arts, but nested rotating curriculums I have not seen covered before in an article. Maybe there's another one out there, but I haven't seen it yet. So that was really interesting to me. Go ahead.
When I wrote that article, there was somebody that popped up and said, "Oh, we've been doing something similar for years." But that was probably the only comment that I had. In the UK, most people use the standard linear curriculum, and that's okay for smaller classes. But where you've got larger classes or you've got younger children, it's a lot harder to implement without having an army of people to help run the class, really.
Yeah.
Now, I know that in the States, they've used rotating curriculum for quite a long time, dating back to the 80s, probably some of them. But over here, it's not so prevalent. So rotating curriculum was a really good idea. But we've had quite a bit of pushback in the UK to it. But like anything, these things that come through the US tend to take a bit of time to circulate within the UK as well. So it's happening. It's happening. There's people using the rotating curriculum now. And the idea behind the nested rotating curriculum was when I saw the rotating curriculum, I wasn't keen on the way that it focused everything just on these set of techniques for 3 months, if you like. So the content was sort of fixed for 3 months. And I thought that by the time they rotate through, if they've got a full cycle of, say, 2 years, then, it's been a long time since they've done the other aspects of their curriculum. Now, instructors might just throw some extra techniques in now and again, but I thought, what would be a really structured way of looking at this? So that's when we came up with the nested rotating curriculum. Which is basically where you've got your normal rotating curriculum content that you've got for the next grading, if you like, but at the same time, you rotate through the rest of the syllabus. So that gives you a sort of, not only is it good for novelty-wise in terms of keeping the kids engaged, but also as well, when you're looking at spacing and having your content revisited, like this on a regular basis, then the recall factor has an impact on long-term retention then in terms of memory retention.
Yeah. The spaced learning effect.
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that. So that's how I came up with it and put that together. So it helped with engagement, but also helped to the side effect with the long-term retention of the techniques, and not just the techniques, because I include the physical stuff in there as well, just on a more fluid basis, a faster basis, if you like.
So for those that aren't familiar, how does a linear curriculum work? I know probably most people know it, but they don't know it by that name.
Well, in the US, most people will know what it is. In the UK, most people will know what it is. But in the US, if they've been using normal rotating curriculum for a long time, then because they've maybe inherited that from their past instructor, then they may not know. But over here, a linear curriculum is where you take your curriculum out for, say, white belt to black belt, and then you put it in order, and you put the harder stuff at the end, and usually the more exciting stuff, and then the easier stuff and more accessible stuff at the beginning. And then you have to pass the first grade before you can then move on to the second part of the curriculum, if you like. And while it can work well for smaller classes, the problem that you get is if you've got a class that goes from white belt to black belt, then you've got everything in between to teach in one class. So even if you rotate through your subject areas, for instance, you do sparring on this rotation, you do pumse, kata, patterns, whatever you want to call it, on the other rotation, then you've still got within that class lots of different content to deliver to lots of different people. One of the plus sides with the standard or linear curriculum, though, is that if somebody's not ready at that point to grade, then it's very easy for them to just grade the following time. So that's one of the strongest advantages that it holds. But it just makes it harder to teach, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. So a rotating curriculum I came up through rotating curriculum when I first started learning Taekwondo. So can you go over rotating curriculum? Because there actually are people in the United States that don't use rotating curriculums yet, even though it's pretty popular among karate and Taekwondo people. So how does a rotating curriculum fix some of those problems, and what are some of the drawbacks of it?
So with the rotating curriculum, what tends to happen is that everybody is working on the same content. If you take your curriculum, if you like, and then you break it down into, say, beginner, intermediate, and advanced, and then you concentrate on, say, just the beginners one, and say you've got 4 grades within that cycle, where you've got, if you do it every 3 or 4 months, you've got that 3 or 4 month cycle where segment where you'll go through that content, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next, and then it goes back to the beginning again. Now, as each person achieves the next grade, then the grade is really, rather than it being a measure of competence like it is in the linear curriculum, it's more symbolization of how much content they've been through. So the idea being that if they come on segment 3 or segment 1, it doesn't matter. After 4 rotations, they've still been through all that curriculum and they're still ready to move up. The benefit being, though, that within a class, you're able to deliver the same content to all the students. And also as well, it's a lot easier if you still do formal gradings, or even if you do sort of tag, tab, stripes, or anything like that to denote how far you are through that segment, then it still works to your advantage that you're still testing on the same aspect, the same proportion of the curriculum, if you like. So it makes it a lot easier that way. But some of the drawbacks of the standard rotating curriculum, which to a certain extent you still get with the nested rotating, is that if somebody's not ready, or they've had some time out because they've been injured or something else, and they've not covered enough of that curriculum to be able to test for it and say they're competent at that level, then they're going to have to go all the way through the curriculum and revisit an extra section, if you like, twice, while missing out on one section as well. Now, I don't know. I know that people basically put in place sort of private sessions and makeup sessions, and maybe they let them test separately on that section, but there's no real easy solution that I know of to get rid of that problem, if you like, because the whole school, the whole club has moved on, if you like, at that stage.
Yeah, I think when I was training, one of the things my instructors did, and it was ATA, so if you showed up to the grading, you would probably pass anyways. But if for some reason you didn't have enough attendance, or you missed the grading, they would do like a private grading or something like that.
Yeah. So there's no real. It's a bit of a bump that you can't really get around.
Yeah,
you can't really get around.
Yeah,
people have to pass that segment, but I don't know if in the UK, where we've got this predominantly linear systems in place, that we have a lot more people that don't pass the grading every time. They don't move up a grade every time. Whereas I feel that in the US, there's a lot more of the schools that maybe they pull all the stops out to make sure that they're ready, but generally the majority of people will move up a grade each 3 or 4 months or whatever that rotation is.
Yeah. I've there's a jiu-jitsu instructor in the Midwest of the United States named Bruce Hoyer, and he does the flipped class. He took the flipped classroom model and applied it to jiu-jitsu instruction. And so what he did was he restructured his classes so that everyone can be working on wherever they are at in the curriculum, regardless of who they're matched with. So they do like kind of a standard warm up, and then they pair off and they'll go and each person will work through their own where they're at in the curriculum, and it's just based around them having looked at the material before class, or sometimes they'll pull it out during that portion of the class. And he's trying to bring in spaced repetition. He's trying to bring in the which I think that's kind of what the flipped classroom model is supposed to be predicated on somewhat. And what he's done is actually, I mean, you could do this with a rotating curriculum, but what he's done is actually made a very individualized linear curriculum that can be run with larger classes. And so you go exactly at your own pace. And when you're ready to get tested for a stripe or your next belt, you just pull, you make sure you have your whatever requirements are in, and then you just pull a instructor aside and you do it on the spot.
So
I guess it's one way to solve that problem.
Is the content different for each person going up a grade? How do they fix have a rotation, but at the same time do the individual? How does that sort of play out in practice?
He has a standard curriculum mapped out, and then he will tailor it for the individual person. Now, he's grown so much since then, I don't know if he can still do that. But when I was talking to him, he could still do that.
Yeah, so there is some individualization there as well. I mean, that gets me onto the last part of that article, which we looked at, was another concept which has been used in education before. And I haven't found out how to work that in totally yet. And that's the idea of a spiral curriculum.
Spiral curriculum.
Yeah,
I really can't. I could not tell you, what is a spiral curriculum?
So a spiral curriculum is where you've got a specific subject area that you rotate through, and you go through that subject area periodically, if you like. Mm-hmm. And as you pass back through that subject area, you increase the difficulty, or you increase the intensity, or there's an increment within that, if you like. Mm-hmm. So say you've got sparring, you'll pass through sparring and you'll be doing something at a beginner level, but the next time you pass through, you'll be doing something harder within that curriculum, if you like. Yeah. So it's more for a sort of subject. And I tend to try think of putting this into practice. I try think of differentiating for the students, so that when you've got the students in the class, if they find something easy, then you need them to be their challenge point to be a little bit higher, mm-hmm. so that you increment the difficulty of that technique. So if you're doing, say, your taekwondo background, if you've been working on a turning kick, it may be that you're working on now a high section turning kick, or a front leg turning kick, or a spinning turning kick. So each time you rotate through it, or each time you see a student in class that needs that challenge point changing, then you make it easier, make it harder, but it still stays within the subject area. Mm-hmm. So that's something I'm trying to look at implementing within the nested rotating curriculum, if I can, so that each of the members are challenged according to their competency levels within that grading structure.
Nice. That's really cool. So, traditional martial arts is going to be hard for that, because you have so many different areas of skill that you're working through.
I wouldn't say that it's hard. It's not hard to do as part of your coaching practice. When you're in a class and you see somebody that's finding it really easy, so they're not quite as engaged, or they're finding it really hard, mm-hmm. Then it's quite easy to just on the spot, as part of your coaching practice, put something in there. It's a bit harder to plan for it,
to structure it, out in advance. If you have a taxonomy of types of exercises, and the complexity, I guess a complexity you could say, is correlates to difficulty in some ways, you could probably do that, but it would be then you have the individual element of, it's not going to be the same level of difficulty for each.
It's not. But you can do it as a coaching tool within your coach development, if you like. That you teach people to differentiate for the students that have got in front of them. This is a huge part of student-centered coaching, if you like, or child-centered coaching in a lot of cases, where you're putting the child first and you're looking at what they need in terms of motivation and what you can give them individually to meet them where they are and to motivate them going forwards. You'll have heard of self-determination theory,
yes,
before, and obviously competence from that, autonomy, competence, and relatedness. The competence part is important within the curriculum stuff that we're talking about now.
Yep.
But not just that, within a class when you're coaching, it's really important as well. Some students need pushing a little bit more, you'll know from experience. Some people need things turning down a level just to give them access to the feeling of competence and progress, if you like.
Absolutely. So you could use the spiraling curriculum as actually more of a mental model behind the scenes of how to approach coaching when you come back around to an aspect of your nested curriculum.
Yeah, definitely.
That's cool. Well, you'd probably need to keep notes too on, when you were on that piece of curriculum where everyone was. That would be helpful.
All you need to do is get them to do it, and you'll see straight away anyway.
Yeah,
and that's about knowing your students as well.
Yeah,
that's why it's always difficult to have a good understanding of each student's ability, if you like, and knowing them personally when you've got huge classes. This is why we tend to take our kids' classes, keep them quite smallish numbers. In our 3 to 4 class, we'll have a maximum of, say, 12 students with one lead instructor and one assistant and maybe a volunteer as well. And then in the 5 to 6 year olds, we'll usually do a maximum of 14 usually for that age group. So it's just about building that relationship with them and having an understanding of what motivates them, what they're capable of, so that you can nudge them when you need to and then provide scaffolding when they're struggling a little.
Absolutely. So if I wanted to create a nested curriculum, I kind of have an understanding of how rotating curriculum works. How do I approach building a nested curriculum?
First of all, you need to start with the technical side, I'd say, because that's the place that most instructors are going to be comfortable. So you can start with that. And then when you're doing a rotating curriculum or even a nested rotating curriculum, one of the important parts of it is that the segment in terms of age groups has got to be quite narrow, because you want a flat syllabus within that, so that you don't want any one point that builds on the last bit or has requires the last bit for you to be able to execute it. So you want quite a flat syllabus, if you like, for the technical aspect. And then you can start to divide it up. And once you've got your list and once you've divided it up, then you can start to plan out that it may be that on week 1, you do the technique that's for the next grading, but you also mix in technique 2 and technique 3. And then the following week, your rotation might be the same techniques that you've got for your next grading, but then instead of 2 and 3, you're doing 4 and 5. And then you're able to rotate them in, and you just keep them rotating round. And then when it gets to the second rotation, in terms of you've had your 3 to 4 month block, and then you've moved on to the next block, then you might be doing technique 2 all the time, and then you're rotating everything else in. So you can do that for the technical aspect, but then you can also do it similar for the other aspects too, like the physical aspects. And if you have some key skills stuff that you like to do with the children, then you can rotate them in too. Or you can keep that system totally separate from your grading if you want, and just award something within a class based on the talks that you're having with the kids, for a month period or whatever you rotate through within that. So definitely look at the technical first, because that's where everybody's comfort zone is. And if you get your head around it on a technical level, then you'll be able to look at doing the rotations with the physical aspects too.
Awesome. Cool. So I wanted to also talk about some other things you've covered on your website. fundamental movement skills, and you also mentioned functional movement patterns. So what are the fundamental movement skills? What's the logic behind that, and how does it work into your program?
So the fundamental movement skills, movement competency is seen as one of the foundations of making sure that as children go between sports, that they have a minimum level of movement competency, if you like, so that they're more likely to have a go at other sports because they're already competent movers. Now, it's also been shown in some studies as well to equate to, if they've got better levels of competency of movement skills at the base end, that they're in sport for longer as well. And that's one of the main factors behind physical literacy as well, that, you've got this base level of movement skills that they can apply to lots of different sports, if you like. Now, depending on which models you look at, they can be split up into quite a few different areas or three main areas, but it covers all the basics, and then some will include things like swimming or moving on ice as well.
Yeah.
Could be one of them too. But basically, you're looking at your running, jumping, hopping, skipping, all the basic things that you do within physical activity, whether that's games or whether that's sports. So that in Maple, we split it down into 8 physical areas. Things like speed and agility and strength and power, and there's 8 in total that we use. That gives us them 8 then to rotate in via the nested rotating curriculum too, to make sure everybody's getting exposure to all the different areas. And the exposure to that comes through, usually for this younger age group, it's delivered through games.
Okay.
Now, as the kids get older and they move up to the 6 to 12-year-old group, then you can do more specific exercises with them that are more seen as traditional exercise, if you like. But at the younger years, we tend to hide it all within games, really. But when I first started looking at teaching this age group, I was looking at originally the Little Dragons model. And back in the time, we knew a lot less then, and we just used to throw in an obstacle course every now and again type thing, and then teach the rest of it, similar to how we taught in the other classes. But over time, we've developed that now so that the games and things that we use have purpose and they're in line with the rotation system. So that rather than just throwing in a random obstacle course because it'll keep the kids entertained, everything's more purpose driven. Not to the children, they're just playing games and having fun and doing some techniques, And what we tend to do as well is within the class setup, when we're delivering the sessions, we rotate between a technical objective and a physical objective every 5 minutes with the 3 to 4s and 5 to 6s. So that what it also does, as well as giving a lot of variety and not requiring much focus from the children for long periods of time, it also makes the pace of the class really quite quick when you're delivering it too.
Yeah.
And that makes you look more passionate and convincing when you're delivering the sessions, because you've got to get through these
to
segments.
The parents,
yeah. Well, not just the parents, for the children as well. And for the coaches, it's more exciting because you're bang, 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 bang through these sections. And before you know it, you've finished the class. And you're like, wow. But it keeps the pace. And that's important too. But it also falls in line then with the, no laps, no lines, no lectures. So we emphasize this a lot, especially with our junior coaches. Don't sit there talking at them for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. A lot of the benefit that they get from this activity is through the physical movement. And just sitting there for longer than 30 to 60 seconds is just too much. It's just too much. So making sure that you're not lecturing them, you're giving the basic instructions, and then you're just letting them have a go. And they'll get it wrong, but a lot of the time they'll learn from the mistakes, and there's an element of discovery in there, and an element of them listening to what you're saying and then executing on that. By the time you've talked to them for 2 or 3 minutes, they've switched off like 2.5 minutes ago. So we tend to keep it quick like that so that it follows on. And the no laps. So try not to throw in there random exercises that have no cause to be in there, really. You've got no purpose for them. Years ago, a strength and conditioning coach told me, if you're delivering something within a class and you don't know why you're delivering it, take it out. Don't deliver it. Put something in there that you know the purpose of, and you're working towards an objective. So no lines, no laps, and no lectures. Or the lines thing, sorry, yeah. So in martial arts, I don't know what it's like in the US, but in the UK, we've definitely been prone to. I remember when I first started learning in 1990, we'd have lines of 10 people or 15 people in a line waiting, standing around, to kick a pad. It just kills the momentum of what the children are trying to do. And if you don't give children something specific to do, or you're creating a structure that allows them to do, move towards what you want them to do and give them something specific to work out, then they'll find something to do. And it won't be something that you like.
Yep.
They'll be pushing each other or playing with the toes or, whatever it is, something not constructive.
Right. Yep. And I always tried. I've done that too. When it was just me and there's 20 kids in class and I don't have an assistant instructor, what do you do? Well, you can have them do drills, but sometimes I'd have them be in the line. I'd be like, all right, you have to do jumping jacks 5 seconds later. Half the kids aren't doing jumping jacks anymore. And I have to...
You just have to structure it better. Yeah. I think we have this assumption that the children won't be able to hold pads from each other from an earliest age until they're, 10 years old or something. But that's quite far from the truth. But it's just holding a pad is just another skill that they need to learn. The same as any other skill that they need to learn, across their martial arts journey. Yeah. But it can be taught, and you can have them holding pads, at 5, 6 years old for each other. Yeah. Still under supervision. You've got to have good positioning so you can see what's going on. A little bit of encouragement, on the kickers, a little bit of praise for the pad holders. But it can be taught same as anything else. But I think I've got an article on cue busters as well. That's quite useful to try remove that as much as possible, that element of cueing. Now, don't get me wrong, with the 3 to 4 year old classes, we still have an element of cueing, because at that age, they're still learning the social aspects of taking turns.
Yep.
So we'll intentionally leave that in there in certain places. But by the time they get to the 5 to 6 year old class and the 6 to 12s, we try to do away with that. One of the times that you will get away with it is where they're engaged in a team activity and they're all cheering for each other and they're engaged in the activity, even when they're not physically running. So in like a relay type option where somebody's running out, doing something, running back, and then the next person's going. As long as you've got, only 3 or 4 in a line, then they'll stay engaged because they're next and they're rooting for the team. So you've got engagement there already. Yeah. But if you can, no lines, no laps, no lectures.
I like that. No lines, laps, or lectures. Awesome. That's cool. On to the point about kids holding pads and having some sort of leadership role amongst themselves. Like, as long as they're up at the right, around 6 or 7 or maybe even 5, depending on the kid. It's really in your mind as an instructor, I've found, because many years ago, I used to do the whole having the kids in the line if I didn't have a assistant instructor and all that. You can trust the kids to do that. And then you can just use the occasional reminder for them to keep them, where to hold the pad or whatever. They need to learn those skills anyways, but they're perfectly capable of learning those skills. And it's okay if 1 or 2 classes is not perfect pad holding. It's not going to hurt in the long run. It's not going to hurt the skill progression of the kids.
No, I think one of the problems sometimes with the average age of the participants in martial art is coming down. It's been coming down for a long time. Now we're down to 3-year-old. We teach down to 3-year-old now, and that's the sort of age where they're at the sort of minimum age where you can get them in the class and they can operate on themselves. And we'll still get the odd student that comes in and they don't feel confident enough. They've got maybe attachment problems sometimes, or there's some other issues and they don't feel confident in going into the class. And we just say, come back in 6 months and try again. But that's the sort of minimum age that we tend to go from. You could probably do younger if you do parent participation, but at both our venues, we've always had the focus around removing parents from the room. Mm-hmm. So we have parents in a side room where we've got like a big screen TV linked to a CCTV camera. So the parents can see the children, but the children don't interact with the parents. Because we want the children to start to build some independence and follow instruction and not, at this age, they're going to be doing things for the parents anyway. I remember going to see my daughter swim when I was younger, and I could see her through the window. You know, she's like waving and drowning at the same time. You're going to get an aspect of that where you put the parent in that room. But if the kid knows that the parents are watching, then they can chat about the session when they come out afterwards. But you tend to find well-meaning parents trying to micromanage the kids sometimes, when we want an element of when we give them some instructions that they're learning to, execute on them instructions, if you like. And there's an element of discovery within the activities too. And besides that, sometimes because it's an activity that the parents have not had much experience with, they're like some of the instructors that have not taught children before, and the expectations are possibly too high sometimes. This goes back to what you were talking about before. The kids are going to make mistakes. They're going to mess up. They're not always going to do as they're told. They're going to fall on the floor, and that's okay. A lot of the time, we just need to set expectations to what to expect when the kids get in there, both for the parents, but for the coaches as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't, when I was teaching in a location working for another school, we didn't have a room like that. That's really good though, because it solves a lot of problems. It helps the kids with independence, but it also helps the kids not to defer to their parents instead of the instructor. It helps the parents not be coaching and barking at the kids in the middle of class over the coach. Right? But we didn't have that. So one of my, I couldn't stop the parents. We would sometimes have conferences with the parents, or I'd have the program manager talk to one. But I couldn't put them in a different room to watch. So what I did was I always had most of class with the kids facing exactly the opposite way of the parents. So the parents could see me teaching, but the kids cannot see their parents, and the parents can't make eye contact with the kids. So
it's a good idea for those that don't have a separate room that they can put the parents in. Definitely your coaching position is always important anyway, to make sure you can see and monitor and recognize when people are doing good and basically give praise where it's appropriate. But definitely from a parental intervention point of view, it's a good idea to have them at the back. We always had it so that traditionally, wherever you were at teaching, that the door and the students were facing you and you were facing the door. So the students weren't distracted by somebody coming in and out, but you could see people coming in and out. So putting the parents at the back makes sense as well if they need to go in and out too.
Yep. It just works better that way. But
if the parents want to sit apart, get a suit on.
And I even noticed with the kids being, I guess, perpendicular to where their parents are sitting, that they still sometimes catch them out of the side of their eyes, and they'll look, and they're much more likely, even though they're kind of facing away from the door, they're much more likely to look at the door if it opens or something like that. So it works better to face them 100% away.
You always get some as well that are trying to be helpful, but if the kid looks like they're not focusing, then they're barking at the kid, and half the time it's not needed. It's like he's 4 years old. It's okay.
I had a oh man, some of these parents. Oh my god. And they didn't stay either. She asked my program manager while I was teaching. She's like, "Can they diagnose him with autism?" I was like, "No, no, we're not clinicians."
I've got an excellent tip for children that once you've been teaching kids a long time, you'll know when you get some children in, if they're on they may be on the spectrum, they may not be, but they may have other complications. But the way that we tend to deal with it is the same way, and I try to teach this to the instructors. All you have to do is, when you suspect the child's showing symptoms in class that you recognise through your experience, all you do is you say to the parent, "I've noticed that little Johnny has been struggling with this again today," and then you just describe the symptoms, and then you just say, "How are they doing at school and other activities?" And then, just like in a sales call, you just shut your mouth and then wait for the parent to speak, and then probably 90% of the time they'll say, oh, we've recognized this, or, oh, we've had him tested for this, or, oh, school have mentioned it before. But you just be quiet. And then I'd say 90% of the time they'll help you with that then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without you having to diagnose them.
Yeah, I can't do that. I'm not trained to do that.
No. I'm doing this a professional doctorate, and I still won't dream of doing that.
Right. And then after the class, because I didn't even know about this until she had left, and then she's after the class, she's like, oh, he can't pay attention, and he's a little bit flighty, but he's doing fine. Like, it wasn't like abnormal. He's like, oh, he's just not paying attention. And he's like, how, where do you think he's going to be in 4 weeks? I was like, I don't know. He's 4 years old. I don't know.
A lot of time with that.
I can't fix him in 4 weeks. He's going to be better. He's not going to be fixed in 4 weeks. Like, he's 4 years old. Like, chill out.
Yeah, different expectations sometimes, but at the same time as well, if it's a child that has been with you for a little bit as well, you can always reflect back to how they were when they first came in. Even if it's only been, say, 3 months or something, there's usually been an improvement within that 3 months. Even if some of that has just come from that person being able to relate to the people in the class, including the coach, being used to the environment. You'll get some positive change in a sort of 3 month period after that anyway. So just reminding them of what the child was like when they first came in is a good place to start as well, without you having to go, oh yes, we will fix them in 4 weeks time.
Yeah, she wanted like a timeline. I was like, I can't give you a timeline. In 6 weeks or so, I mean, he's definitely going to be better than when he came in, but it's not. They I think they came for maybe a month, and then they just dropped out. We didn't see him anymore.
What you tend to find is, depending where you are on the spectrum of, a more developing the child point of view at this side to the ultra competitive clubs that you get at the other side, what you tend to find is that wherever you are on that spectrum, that as people will come through the door, you will attract people that are attracted to the way that you do things, your club's values and mission and vision, and that you'll push away the people that aren't. So that first sort of 3 months, if you like, that it usually is, sometimes there's students in there and parents that you'll lose, and it won't be a bad thing. You're not the right club for them. I mean, I'm all for retention, and while I still obviously do marketing because I need to, I really lean on having good retention. Really, it makes me a little bit lazy with the marketing, but at the same time as well, I know that I'm attracting the people that are in line. It's not the good people, the bad people, or any other people. It's the people that are in line with what we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. So the functional movement patterns, we talked about fundamental movement skills. What are the functional movement patterns? Is that something you do with the older kids? Is that where that comes in?
You can start to do, in terms of this sort of physical activities, we'll have basic ways of doing some of the basic movement patterns that we're talking about. We can do them with the 5 to 6s. For instance, if you do normal press-ups and you just have the normal way of doing press-ups, you'll get a lot of these kind of kids flapping the body about and stuff. But what we tend to do, we have got little abbreviated ways of delivering the different exercises. So for instance, with the children, I borrowed this, don't tell anybody, I borrowed this from an old Thai boxing instructor that used to teach me years ago. It'd start the press-ups off, lying on your front with your hands under your chin. You'd press off the floor, you come back down, you put your hands back under your chin. So there's no cheating of the movement. Every time you've got to lift your body off the floor, and then you get to come back down to this position again. So we use that for press-ups, and we've got other movements like with a squat. When we looked at the way the teenagers that we've had for quite a while were doing the squats, it was awful technique-wise. Just poor movement patterns, if you like, that were embedded in. So what we get them to do is we put 2 of the sort of smarty pads on the floor, or we use the hanging bags that are just laid down at the side, and we get the kids to touch the bum on the pads and then stand back up. So just something as basic as that, just a small adaptation, can provide an anchor point, if you like, for them to look at. And you just bake it within the exercise then, and then they just build good form over time then. So if these movement patterns are sometimes called functional movements or primal movements, but your basic squatting, hip hinging, bending from the waist, pressing, pulling, all the basic sort of exercises that you'd go through as part of a complete PT exercise, but not necessarily with equipment.
Yeah.
So we'd still, when it comes to equipment, we still use some equipment for strength-based stuff, even for the younger kids. But it's not always overtly a sort of, you're going to stand there and do 10 of these. We'll still put it within the game if we can. We use medicine balls, leather medicine balls. So if kids drop them on the feet or anything, there's no harm done.
Yeah.
And we can get them, doing basic throws and stuff like that for power type movements too, which is cool. As long as they're not, throwing at each other.
Yeah. One thing we used to do with the push-up problem with the really young kids is we called them lion push-ups. And so they would have to start with everything chest, chin on the ground.
Yeah.
And then they had to, they kept the body on the ground. And this is for really young kids, really, that are still trying to develop the strength here. They push themselves all the way up in the air and roar like almost an upward dog position.
Yeah.
But they're causing them to use their shoulder and arm strength to press themselves up at that point. Now, when you're, I guess if you have a really weak 6 or 7 year old, that's good too. But if you're with them, what I would do is get them started in planks first.
Yeah. We do that as part of
them stable, and then be like, all right, hold the plank position. Now try to do a push, And of course, you still get the kids that do the whole, ragdoll thing with their head.
Body flopping.
Yep.
What we did for the younger children as well, I was looking around for some strength-based stuff. It sounds funny saying it. Some strength-based exercises for 3 to 4 year olds. And I did find some that were reasonable, but the best people to look at for this stuff was, the gymnastics.
Yes.
So with the gymnastics, they train the kids from a young age because it's an early adaptation sport, and they perform at a high level earlier on. But at the same time as well, they have these core holds at basically different body positions that they do for the children. So we included them within. So when we've got the strength and speed and power and everything else, that's for the 5 to 6 year olds and above, that there's 8 of them. Whereas with the 3 to 4 year olds, we don't do power and speed and stuff like that, but there's 4. But one of them is strength. Because the research suggests that there's never an age where developing strength is not a good thing. That's age appropriate. Not talking about lifting weights and stuff, but so the basic body shapes that we took from gymnastics, they were really useful. And I think we added a couple on ourselves to make them up to weight, but they're really useful for the younger kids, even for the 5 to 6 year olds, just to build, like you said, you start them off in the plank position, but these positions that they can hold just to build that core strength, if you like, is always going to be useful because everything's built on that.
Absolutely. Those are awesome. So, wow, that was awesome. I don't really have any more questions to ask, but where can people find you?
Facebook. I'm on Twitter, but I tend to keep that for my academic stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't post a lot on there, but I communicate with other people in academia, but definitely the website, which is maplemartialarts.com. If you sign up for the newsletter there as well, then I send that out on a semi-regular basis, depending on what I've got on, as well as the 2 full-time venues and this professional doctorate, and still coaching a bit myself. I mentor some other coaches. I work with governing bodies, and I've got 3 children, 2 of them below 4. So that tends to eat up a chunk of my time.
Busy man. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the Facebook page. I've got a Facebook group on there as well. That you'll be able to find if you Google Maple Martial Arts, or if you Facebook search for Google Martial Arts, but maplemartialarts.com is probably the best place. And I've got loads of articles on there, probably about 25, and I'm trying to produce one every 2 weeks. Sometimes it'll be a bit more on the business side, but more often than not, it'll be based around retaining students and delivering a product and service that's in line with their needs and wants.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you for coming on. I hope we can do this again sometime. I love talking about this side of stuff. So.